Governor Gavin Newsom is trying to reform the healthcare infrastructure in California, and he has a few major initiatives that people are hoping will come together to really change the way we reach people with mental illness and addiction and people who are homeless in California. And when it came about, the CARE Act, which is the bill behind this program called Care Court, it was really, it was announced with a sense of desperation, that we need to do something to address the dire situation that California is in. California has 170,000 or so people who are homeless. Many of them are unsheltered, more unsheltered here than in other places like New York, where they have a more robust shelter system. So the CARE Act was ushered in with this great sense of urgency about the dire situation, and it was specifically marketed as a way to help people who are homeless, who are experiencing severe mental illness, and also addiction. That's how it was kind of packaged by the governor and by other supporters. And it really gave families who've been dealing with loved ones who are mentally ill and who are on the streets a lot of hope, because they thought, finally, we're going to be able to get help for our loved ones. We're going to be able to petition a court-administrated plan to help shepherd people through therapy and really extricate them from this terrible cycle that a lot of people find themselves in, which is psychiatric holds. So they'll be in a hospital for 72 hours and they have to be released. Where do they get released to? Either the streets, or maybe they end up in jail. So the idea behind it, and really what families who advocated for this law were hoping, is that it would allow them to intervene in this terrible cycle and reach people before they deteriorate, before they get worse, before they end up on the streets or they end up in jail. And this was kind of the spirit of the law, if you will, when it was introduced. When it was introduced, and the way that it was written about in the media, and the way the original text of the earliest versions of the bill were, is it had stronger language, and it was seen as a way to compel treatment for this population, right? It would be an involuntary, or parts of it would be involuntary. And then there was a really big backlash from disability rights organizations, civil liberties organizations like the ACLU, and they sued. The California Supreme Court actually denied their challenge, but they sued, and they issued a lot of public statements, and they put a lot of pressure, and ultimately there were amendments made to the bill, and it is now really, it's a voluntary program. It's entirely voluntary. So people who enter the program, they can comply or they can not comply, they can graduate or they can leave, but they're not compelled to do so. They're not compelled to take their medication if the program is put together and the judge orders that medication is part of that. They don't have to do it. It's at will. It's funny because advocates and opponents, they see this bill so differently. They see the program so differently. On the one side, the opponents are saying this is going to create a pathway to conservatorship, and we're going to lock people up against their will, and it's a violation of their civil rights. And on the other side, people who support it are saying this is going to interrupt that cycle and get people the help that they desperately need. There were 7 counties in the initial cohort that rolled this program out in October. And these included large counties, Orange County, Riverside, San Francisco. These were among the initial ones. And Los Angeles followed December 1st. But county officials that I spoke with in Los Angeles, for example, they said it was a heavy lift to get this off the ground, because they had to coordinate between the mental health department and the court system. And counties are trying to publicize this. They're hiring people. They're figuring out how this works. It's a big launch. Like, they put a lot of manpower and money and time into this. They're getting money from the state to launch the programs, but a lot went into it. They rolled it out, and it was slow in the beginning, so people had their doubts. But now, in fact, for the first cohort, we are entering the 6th month, right? So we should be expecting to see some acceleration or some indication of how is it working? Is it What's the uptake like in these communities, in these different counties? And in some counties, I mean, in all counties it's low, but for example, we spoke with Orange County Supervisor Doug Chaffee, and he told us that they've spent, their budget is around $7 million, and when you add the budget for the Public Defender's Office, it's almost $10 million into this program for the first year. And they've had 59 petitions, and only 4 have actually been accepted and gone to the stage of a care plan, where the judge approves a plan for the person to go through the care court. So that's 4 people and nearly $10 million and nearly 6 months. So it's raising questions about what population this bill is actually going to target. So there are only 4 people in the program from 59 petitions, and of those 59 petitions, maybe 25% were people who were identified as homeless. And this is not just Orange County. In Riverside County, there were 39 petitions, 5 were accepted. All those 5 were identified as homeless, so it's a little different in each county. But still, we're in the single-digit numbers, and we're in month 6. So, you know, some people were expecting that it would have picked up pace by now. Riverside has nearly $10 million as well, because they got about 6.6 for their mental health department, and then they got another 4 or 5 million dollars for the Public Defender's Office. So we're looking at, you know, in big counties like $10 million or more. In LA County, they got a one-time disbursement of $15 million to get it launched. So we're seeing all of this money invested and all of this effort put into rolling out the program, and we're not seeing great returns yet. And it's definitely, by now, people have figured out that it's not actually doing what it was advertised to do, which is to address homelessness, to address a specific population that is severely mentally ill and homeless. Because as you can see, there's only, you know, say 25% in Orange County of the applicants are identified as homeless. In Los Angeles, it was about 40%. So that's not what it's doing. We have yet to see what it will do, but it's not doing what it advertised. Los Angeles County told us that they have received 85 petitions and that they accepted all 85 of them. I'm not sure. They might revise that at some point, but that is what they told us, that they've all been accepted. So that would really be an outlier that differs from other counties who are receiving a lot of petitions and only approving, you know, a small portion of them. Again, how it was envisioned is a way for families and professionals to bring in people who really fall through the cracks of the system. And it's very specifically targeted. It's very narrowly targeted only to people who have a previous diagnosis of a disorder on the schizophrenia spectrum or some other kind of psychotic disorder. It's targeting a very narrow population, and at the same time, it's a voluntary process. So the idea is that you bring people into this very complicated administrative bureaucratic system, which is, you know, the judicial system, the court system. You give them a public defender to represent them, and you have a team of experts prepare a plan for them, which could include medication, counseling, housing or shelter. With regular hearings in that court, you encourage the person to stick to this plan, which a judge signs off on, and complete it. And at the end of a year, they can graduate or the program can be extended. But again, at this point, it's all voluntary. The idea is, if you think about it, if you try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who is living on the streets, who is schizophrenic, who is really a harm to themselves, and somebody who they don't know, a mental health worker or someone, you know, who's doing outreach for the county, comes up to you, say you're that person on the streets, and they say, hey, do you want a free plan to help you get treatment for your mental health? You don't know me, but I can get you into a court system where you have a public defender represent you, and and you can go through this, you know, program that has evidentiary hearings and all of these complicated things. And you know, I think that you would probably say no to that. Like, I don't think it would be the most attractive option. Like, who wants to go to court, right? So I think this is the difficulty that some people are finding in their counties, is that they've put a lot of effort into outreach, but the premise is a little bit impractical. Just when you think about it in that way, there's a trust issue. Like, why would anyone choose to go to court? I mean, they don't have to. At this point, the way the law was amended, the way it was rewritten, it's all entirely voluntary. So you can go to court, you can follow the plan, you can show up, you can do your hearings on Zoom, or you can show up to a courthouse and do them. But if you don't want to be part of it anymore, you can just drop out. Or if you don't follow the plan, the judge can decide to terminate the program and close the file. And there's nothing that binds people. There's no consequence. There's no fine if you don't complete the program or if you don't take your medication. In other words, a judge can order that medication is part of your plan, but nobody can force you to take your medication. So there's also the possibility that they'll actually get people to agree to go to court, and then people will drop out or they won't stick with it. The hope is that you'll have this group of professionals who care about this person, who know their history, who can kind of coax them gently towards recovery. And if it works, that's how it's going to work. Maybe they can get housing, maybe they'll get treatment, maybe they'll get medication, and they'll have people looking over them and checking in on them. So this is the hope. But so far, the numbers are really low, and people have a lot of concerns about the fact that both it's a very narrowly targeted population and the fact that it's entirely voluntary. There is a question among county leaders and people who are observing this and now have questions because it's not exactly going according to plan or how it was marketed, how they thought it might go. Why do we need all of this administration, all of the extra hires, all of the bureaucracy for a court when a person can just opt out of it? What's the point of that? Why do you need a public defender? And I guess the response to that would be, you need a public defender to ensure that people's rights are protected during the process. But again, what's the point of this process? Where is it leading? And one of the criticisms would be that all of this money, and I mean, at this point we're talking about more than $100 million for the first year, more than $200 million for the second year. All of this money is going into this program to hire social workers, hire public defenders, hire administrative assistants, do outreach and marketing. That money, and also to reach a very, very tiny sliver of the population for a program that's difficult to get into, right? Because you have to have documentation, they have to have been formerly diagnosed, they have to not be getting treatment elsewhere, this has to be that there are all kinds of restrictions that apply, right? So it's hard to get them in there. But then once they're in there, they can just leave. There's nothing that ties them to the program. There's no sanction, there's no fine if you don't graduate or you don't comply with the judge's plan. On the other hand, if counties don't comply with the guidelines set by the state, and this is a mandatory program that must be rolled out by all 58 counties in California by the end of this year, if counties don't comply, they on the other hand can be charged $1,000 a day. I think for a maximum of $25,000. So there is accountability for the counties that are providing the services, and they've been scrambling to make sure that they have this infrastructure in place for when it launched. So again, a lot of resources, a lot of money and time are going into this, and it's not bearing the kind of results that people expected it to, even on the conservative end of the spectrum.